Okay, guys, welcome. Thank you for being here today. I think we have a very good topic for you guys today. But before we get started, I'll have Julie introduce herself to you guys. Julie, please let us know about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Mavrogeorge. I live in California. I am the owner of a consulting business, Jdogmav Consulting. I'm a former CTE coordinator and IT specialist in the Central Valley at Fresno Unified. And I now travel around the U.S. Helping schools, districts, and organizations create sustainable esports programs, as well as drones and for drone racing and sim racing and other STEM activities. And I'm just happy to be here to talk about teacher training today.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Jolie. Okay, guys, so my name is Etheard Joseph. I am the founder of Elevated Esports training. And this topic is daily to all of us because it's basically teacher training, right? So we all know how Scholastics Esports is evolving. And I know, Jolie, you are coming you're based mostly out of California, but you're everywhere. I will have you kind of start us off. What's the evolution that you have seen in your area as far as teacher training or on a CTE realm? Because I know it's very specific CTE compared to other type of teacher training.
Absolutely. I will say that it's still picking up. Especially within esports, there's a lot of professional development that is being provided around the pathways that exist within CTE. Here in California, they've been spending this last year redefining the California Department of Ed has been redefining some of those pathways and moving some things around. So esports is going to live in hospitality for event management and that type of thing. But I think finally what we are seeing is that, we had so many years of teachers who just, okay, I'll be a coach, but not knowing really what to do. They ran it as a club. And now we're seeing an increase of a lot more competitive programs beginning. And so teachers are reaching out and wanting training around the production portion and graphic design and just the network infrastructure of esports and tournaments, as well as maybe some computer science and game design within Unity or Unreal Engine. And so there are a lot of opportunities out there right now for professional development for teachers as they really begin to understand the true nature of the esports ecosystem.
So that's well put because recently the Esports Trade Association has a white paper called The Lone Game. And then there's a lot of key bullet points. One of them was because you mentioned somebody say, hey, you know what, I'll be a coach, but there is no sustainability. Fine. Okay, now it's a club, but now how do we scale it from a club to infuse CTE, and so that's one of the biggest. There's a few alarming things from the Lone Game white paper, but yeah, stability. How do we unfold it? In addition, they also mentioned what's the industry relationship, because for instance, where I was, the last place I was, they had hired me to turn a club. They had the club for years. They had all the technology, they were playing, the traditional games, but that's all it was. My job was very simple. How do you turn that into a club, into a 4-year pathway? In addition, what are some of the industry certs you're going to introduce? In addition to that, are you going to have any industry partners involved? So these are the intricacies when you're coming from a club to a place that it becomes more learning. In addition, the parents nowadays are having a lot of say. Hey, you know what? I heard about esports. Tell me more. How can that benefit my son or my daughters?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think one of the leading programs is actually in your neck of the woods in West Palm Beach that does that very, very well. I know you know Julius
Absolutely.
Edwards. Yeah. So he is also the president of the Sunshine State Esports League. But in his class, he utilizes Adobe and all four of the Adobe all four of the Adobe certs within his class to structure students for game design. They develop all the assets for the stream, the backgrounds, the overlays, the transitions. They learn, they design the jersey and the T-shirt for the year, and so the kids are seeing what they're learning in class actually come to fruition, at their school. And he's done an incredible job, as well as the after school portion for esports, right? He runs it as a full-fledged student-led program. So they have, a president, a vice president, a secretary, a treasurer, a sergeant of arms, right? Like, so they have created the system within their own school, and they have true ownership of the program. I just love what he's built there, and I think that is such an incredibly sustainable model that we do need to educate more of the coaches and teachers, and train them to be able to do that.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that is really what the bottleneck is. You have your Julius, you have you, and there are others out there, but it is not mainstream yet. Most teachers that comes in, I mean, they are phenomenal teachers, but now how do you piece it together? I've said this, for instance, I was in Tennessee doing a teacher training, and then when I said, hey, you know what? For instance, let's say you take Adobe Firefly. Now that itself can be a whole CTE unpacking, and a lot of teachers may not feel comfortable using that software. So I think this is where it's very crucial. Yes, the teachers are eager. Admin wants esports. Everybody wants esport, but how do you actually train the teacher? And not too long ago, Florida passed a bill that they actually want more teacher training, because I think out of all the places, when it comes to CTE, that way it becomes a little bit gray area, because if you have your traditional subjects, it's a little bit more concrete. CTE could be aviation, and it could be drone, it could be as far as in tourism, it could be it's so on. So that's why it becomes a little bit wide angle, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just use an example here in California. I have a friend who recently took a position in a new district, and they want esports, and they're like, okay, so you develop the, hi James, they develop she's going to have to develop the curriculum for both computer science, but they also want her to do game design. And not just the coding side, but, using Unreal Engine. And so fortunately, we do have partners out there, right, that can help, educate and train teachers on how to use these tools so that they are equipped. But, I think that's happening a lot within high school as well, is that, okay, they may have a strong competitive program that's led by, let's say, a history teacher, right, or a math teacher. But now how do I, okay, now you're going to be teaching this as well, or we're bringing somebody in to augment the program, but the teacher doesn't know enough about esports in order to create that curriculum, or maybe they know enough, but they don't, I'm moving from now an after school thing into a school, and what does that look like? And so I think it's important that we do provide the necessary education development for those teachers, because personally, I think for too long, they've just been kind of thrown in there to say, hey, go do this. And they do it as best that they can, but, they need support along the way.
No, absolutely. It's to piggyback on what you're saying. One of the findings when I was reading the white paper that the trade had is that it usually starts with one person, but a lot of times they get burnt out, because not only they are, for instance, they might be playing 3, 4 different games. That means they're staying after school 3, 4 different afternoons for a good 2, 3 hours. So now when are they going to do this planning? In addition, they probably teach in another subject. So after a year passed by, they get burnt out. And then in addition, when they get burnt out, now everything folds. So one of the key findings that the paper had, it should not be a one-person show. It should be a collective. Hey, you know what? If you have your admin support, hey, you know what? I am willing to start this, but however, though, can I get one other person to back me up? Because where I was before, I was like I wasn't the only person per se, but for the most part, I was the person staying after. I was the person in the classroom. I was the person say, you know what? How do I make this adjusted to the Florida state standard? So after a while, it could be a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Yeah. And James just put a comment. Yes, absolutely. You can cook, but okay, that means you can farm, right?
Thank you, James.
Right. As an IT specialist, my forte was STEAM, right? Or STEM activities, right? Robotics, coding, drones, esports fell into that, game design. That was my realm. But often it would be like, hey, can you come fix my printer? Can you come, my device isn't working right. I mean, I learned those, right? That's just my, the way I'm wired. I was like, yep, I'll figure this out. I'll learn it. I'll talk to the people, right? But not everybody has time to do that. So when I was working in the district and as a CTE coordinator, well, even before that, when I was still in the IT team, what I started doing was working with individual teachers across schools, right, within different pathways, and then also bringing together those teachers within the same pathways across sites. Now, my district has about 70,000 kids, and we have 14 high schools. And also at the time we had 86 CTE teachers. So we're a large district with a large group of educators that can come together and support one another. So I was fortunate with that. But I think education as a whole, we live in these silos, and I feel like educators feel like they have to do it all. And so what we tried to build was like, okay, we're going to take students from 3 different high schools, all within video production. We're going to have them work together to, help run an event or help to produce the event. And, that really helped those teachers see how each taught slightly differently and how they could collectively work together and bring their curriculum together to create a CTE course within esports. Now, ultimately, what I helped them do was to take their current content and I call it esportify it, right? So that they didn't have to change what they taught. They just changed the focus to which they were teaching, right? So instead of, news broadcasting, it was esports broadcasting. And I think that there are ways to train teachers within the structure that they already exist and within the system that they exist to empower them to be able to add these courses or just change the course title that also is going to attract more students, which then, decreases behavior issues and increases attendance and increases test scores and all of that as well, which is what their sites are looking for.
You said something, esports-fying it, and that's really a big point because I'm very fortunate. I've been in CTE for about a decade now. When I got started, my job was to build a hospitality and tourism program, and then a TV production program, and so on. But now I think that that's been in the realm of CTE for a long time, we kind of take for granted how much leeway we have under that big umbrella. And I see it where teachers that's not familiar with CTE, they have a more constricted way. It's not that it's as good or it's bad, but now let's say now this person become an esports coach. A lot of times they may not realize, how much freedom they have. You know what, you teach English. You know what, it's fine. Could you imagine writing an essay about your main character? Pros, cons, which stage they work best, which stage they don't. And, you know what? How about if you don't know these words? Hey, go and look them up. You can match that with your state standard. So I think this one. I'm glad that we're having this discussion. I'm hoping that when teachers, hear us talk, they can say, "Oh my God, you know what? I teach math. I teach science. You know what? I can definitely, make this, put this into my wheelhouse." And you also mentioned another thing about increasing attendance. NASAF and other places have all that data out there. It's public knowledge, but I can see it. Where I was, I don't have the definitive number, but I think every school has a portion of students that they want something. They don't play their regular sports. They're not they don't do drama, and they want X, whatever X happens to be. For us, it is scholastics esports. So I saw it where I was getting students that was coming in every day. Where before when I look at their other classes, they are missing some other classes, but they never miss my class because they knew, hey, I'm the captain of Smash. We play on Thursdays. You know what? If I don't show up, Mr. Joseph going to say, hey, or where I was.
Right. Yeah. And absolutely. I think some of the national data, and again, this is not official. This is just data like myself talking to other districts or other state associations. It's roughly about 60%, a little bit higher in some states, but 60-ish% of students that within esports that they've never participated in any other activity, right? That's a huge number, in my opinion, right? That
absolutely.
If you think of, I guess I want to say esports is still relatively new, right?
Yes.
I think we're, in the toddler kind of stage, right? As far as development and what it really is, as far as linking to our athletic associations. And, there's a push out there, especially in collegiate, to have it fall under athletics. But in some states, it stays within CTE because of all the connection points. And so we are reaching more and more kids. When you mention, math, science, English, yes, using Rocket League for math, right? And yes, geometry. Sim racing is excellent for physics and engineering, for data analytics. I mean, data analytics, having students keep track of their stats and whatnot are under any esport, but, specifically for like sim racing, again, drones, right? Like drone racing that falls under transportation for CTE and aviation. It's endless. It honestly, in my opinion, esports hits every single one of the pathways, and you could argue even agriculture if you bring in Minecraft, type of a thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it does hit directly with any one of those pathways. So there is a way to, utilize some sort of esports in all of it, which is going to attract more kids because kids game. The statistics are 93 to 96% that of all of us game, right? And I often talk about that at conferences. I'm like, well, do you play Angry Birds or Candy Crush or Mojang on your phone? Like, you're a gamer, right? And people don't necessarily think about that, but kids in particular, it's the carrot that we can use to educate them and to teach them skills that they otherwise, wouldn't necessarily learn.
No, it's true. And now I'll take it one step further. I see it when teachers start diving into specialized CTE training, and now this is my opinion. they actually enjoy it because they themselves are opening new doors that they didn't have before. Because I know a lot of times, when we look at these data, it shows how much the kids love it, which is fact. But now the teachers themselves actually love it too, because I can speak from experience, and you probably can too. A lot of the workshops that we do, teachers say, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea, I could do this," and you can tell the better they become, the better they can teach the students too. Because the reason I'm saying this, a lot of teachers, we all know they are. They're hardworking, they stay late, they come in early. But now what I see with these trainings, in a way, they get back some free time for themselves. Because you know what? If you can get through this CTE lesson a little bit faster, and guess what? And still connect with the students, still connected with your state standards, and then still connected with your certification. And guess what? You finish a few minutes early. Hey, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So I think, in a way, these specialized CTE trainings, they help teachers not only to gain some more time for themselves, and it also now gives them another level of connection with the students too.
Absolutely. And, I want to touch a little bit on grant funding, right? Because CTE programs are largely funded by grants.
Absolutely.
And most of those grants require
yes,
professional development for teachers. And
absolutely,
typically, it's your CTE department or your curriculum instruction department who are writing those grants, right? But they don't necessarily provide the outlines and the structure of what was written into those grants necessarily to the actual teacher. And, so if you are a CTE teacher, reach out to your CTE department, your curriculum instruction department, whatever, wherever that funding STEM department comes from, and ask for that professional development, because they have to spend money on it. Sometimes they don't know, right? The administrators don't know that you need the training, right? And then you don't know that it's available. So, one, become friends with, the other departments as well, right? And your IT department, although they don't have as many, maybe grants that are available, but, the more that you can create that community within your district or within your school in particular, you'll find ways to be able to, get the training that you need. And then also, I would say, like organizations like, the Esports Trade Association and other partners out there, like just, Google and research and be a part of communities, because, I think, even the conferences like FETC and ISTE and your local, I encourage teachers to go to their local state ones. Here in California, it's Cali, right?
Yep.
Or site. Yep. Or site, right?
Esportsta.org, you can, or absolutely.
Yeah. You want to meet those other educators that are doing similar to you, to be able to find out, attending webinars like this, to be able to find out what is available. Who can I reach out to? How do I, provide those resources for myself and other educators in my school or district and my students, right? Like, I agree wholeheartedly with what you said about, the more that a teacher grows and learns, the more excited they get, because let's face it, gaming and esports is fun, right? It's a good time, and kids are attracted. The more I dive in, right, the more fun I have and the more excited about it I get. So when everyone's excited, everybody succeeds.
No, you're absolutely right. It's especially, I was doing some research, before this talk, and then Florida has a CTE survey that was done, and a lot of, and all the stuff, it's public data. And in that survey, a lot of teachers, are asking for specific training. We all know there's training everywhere. There's no shortage of training. I think now what what the state or what admin and teachers are saying. You know what? We want specialized training, because let's face it. And I know a lot of teachers, you know what? I've attended training before and it had nothing to do with me. And I'm sure if you've been in education one way or another, you find yourself in that category. You went to a training. It was a good training, but it's just that it wasn't for me. And I like what you said about, going to events, joining these organizations, because I think especially with Scholastic's esports, it could be very overwhelming because you think you're all alone. Here I am, I was tasked to do this. And let's face it, a lot of times there's not that much resources in-house, but it doesn't mean that there's no resources available, And I also like that when you mentioned for teachers to advocate, hey, we do have CTE money, how can I take this CTE training? Because yes, you're right, by law, all that money is in there, for your for that type of training. So in a way, it will definitely help teachers. Now, I want to ask you a question. Now, do you find yourself from time to time educating parents also on the benefits and how Scholastic's esports is good for the schools and for their kids?
Absolutely, because parents are the cog really that makes the education wheel turn, right? That when parents speak up and speak out, the boards listen, the principals listen. And I do find it, important that we educate parents because, especially now, like here in California, we have a few districts who are, banning screen time, and I honestly struggle with that because not all screen time is equal. And so if you have parents saying, okay, well, my kids are learning on screens or my kids spend enough time at home on, a screen, it's important to educate them about the overall, I'm going to use the word again, ecosystem of esports, right? When we talk about esports and building sustainable programs, it is not the gameplay. It's not only gameplay. Gameplay is the carrot. It's a small percentage. It is the education that kids are learning in, again, production and casting and network involvement, whether, esports has physical therapists and financial advisors and team managers and, any career that students are interested in, right? It has a touch point in esports. And so I think it's yes, educating parents on that, but also the social skills that kids learn, right? We now, we're in a state where we're still teaching to the test. Kids are memorizing things for tests, but where's the critical thinking? Where's the strategic planning that goes into, the learning for a specific career skill, right? Esports, the communication, collaboration, the creativity, the critical thinking, strategic planning. Kids learn how to self-regulate, right? They learn how to work on a team. Those are all skills that are employable across any industry. And so honestly, educating parents, hosting, I always encourage districts or schools to host a parent night and have your kids play your parents. And every time I've been to one of those, the parents always lose, and the parents immediately see how important and how their kids are communicating and working together. And again, I always like to talk about the neurodiversity of esports, right? We attract a lot of neurodivergent students. Now, I kind of categorize that, it's broad. It's also students with anxiety and depression and dyslexia, of course, autism and ADHD and whatnot. But the fact that we attract kids that would not otherwise participate in other activities, right? It provides them an opportunity to find community and belonging, as well as develop all these other skills. And parents, when they see that, the light bulb goes off.
Absolutely.
And they also understand the difference between esports and gaming. Huge difference.
Absolutely. Nick, thank you. Yes. Thank you for the comment. And to basically piggyback to what you're saying, uh, it's basically the pipeline of workforce, stability, and then Nick mentions screen time become learning times with proper outcomes. So yes, both of you are right. Not every screen time, is the same. You watching it to a movie. It's basically passive enjoyment. But you know what, you playing Rocket League. You know what, to look at the trajectory of a ball. What angle is that? That is not the same thing. And now to go back to the workforce pipeline, the reason why I'd ask you about educating parents, because in the past I find myself, parents are curious. Hey, you know what? I'm hearing about this esports thing. Like how is it relate, to my child? How is it benefiting? And then one of the things I always say, I'll say, what? Let's take law. Let's say your child wants to become a lawyer. Could you imagine doing IP law for Epic Games? Like, could you imagine? You are the head of marketing for Nintendo. I mean, these are all ways Scholastics Esports is actually training you, for the work ahead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, structured learning environments. Yes, very good. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah. Hi, Nick. Yeah. So I fully agree that, parents are curious. Well, there's two schools of thought, right? Some parents are curious and the others are skeptical.
Yes.
And so we have to, speak to both sides of that coin. And the ones who are curious, they, I tend to find that they are the parents that are regulating screen time as well at home. But when they see it in action and they understand, like I was one of those parents, like you didn't play video games during the week, you only played on the weekends, and that was after chores and homework were done. Now both of my boys deal with anxiety, and had I known then what I know now, I would have operated completely differently, because screens are safe for neurodivergent students, right? Like having a conversation with you here on a screen is much different than when you and I are in person and we're face to face. And, it's more difficult often for neurodivergent kids. And so when parents see that and see their interaction of the kids, and the light bulb goes on, it's an amazing feeling, right? And then of course, the interaction between neurotypical and neurodivergent kids, like that changes. So kids that are, typically kind of maybe picked on or not as included in the high school or middle school atmosphere right now, all of a sudden are making friends with those people, those other students that maybe they hadn't had friendships with. They're seen differently. And that to me is even more powerful than just the educational piece. It's that social, that belonging piece, that, feeling welcomed and a part of something for students that also I think we need to educate parents on.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. You know what? When we're going to kind of change gear a little bit. Now, what are some of the sweet spots you think educators that's coming fairly new into Scholastics Esports, how do you think they should approach getting involved with the industry? When I say industry, for example, okay, now the word industry could be a local organization, or could be a big company. Now, for example, one way that I am bringing Scholastics Esports more to my neighborhood this weekend, I've teamed up with the local police department to have a gaming event. It's titled Guardians I got to look up the title, but now they love the idea when I pitched it to them, and I even have Julius bringing some of his consoles to help out, and then before you know it, now the fire department's involved, food, and so on. So these are one way. These are one way that I'm actually trying to rewrite how people see esports. Now, in your area, what are some ways people are rewriting how people see esports?
So what we're seeing, I actually had a meeting this morning. What we're seeing is some, like I'm going to call them charity events, and whether that's charity for, a local children's hospital, or even if it's funding that's going back into a nonprofit for esports. So for example, here in California, we have the California Esports Association. I'm the president, and we have a full board of people up and down the state. But we want to host, just like you're talking about, trainings, as well as, events, and then invitationals, once all of the finals are kind of determined. Well, that costs money, but we don't want to charge our members money to be a part of our organization. But we want to be able to, charge for these events and whatnot. So seeing those charitable events where we're hosting, again, yes, like with the police department or fire department, or a lot of here in California, especially in the Los Angeles area, there, Riot is actually located there, but there are a lot of media companies and whatnot who are willing to open up the spaces, or hey, we'll have an event here. So it's I tell people all the time, reach out locally. When you want to get involved with the community, reach out locally first, right? Find out what's in your area. Here in Fresno, we have like a media conglomerate. It's called CMAC. And they have a broadcast van, and they will come out and they will help put on your production and broadcast, and bring out full equipment. They'll get students involved, and nice. And then it's a matter of like working with another local company called Blue Shell Gaming, right? And they sell, used equipment and, cosplay and, action figures and things like that, but they are very involved in the community as well, and they'll help support and advertise. So when it's thinking outside of the educational box, I guess, right?
Absolutely.
Because there are community partners that want to support, they just don't know. And so they don't know who to reach out to. So if you are an educator and you want to, get involved, start with your community. I will say also get involved with, national organizations like ESTA, NASEF you mentioned. There are state organizations now under the umbrella of the Interstate Scholastic Esports Alliance. There are 27 states across the US that have a state organization. Get involved with that state organization that has a lot of resources that they can support you with getting started with your program. Or like I travel a lot here in California, just going and helping and supporting events and helping them run events, and meeting with them before about answering questions and things like that. Like that's what those state orgs are for. And then, like you mentioned, Epic and, some of the larger or other organizations, there are so many resources for computer science and esports. There's SkillQuest that does Rocket League coding competitions where you code your Rocket League bot, right? There's Cleverlike, who hosts right now. They're hosting free Unreal Engine educator trainings for the education, the educator accelerator. Yes, there are organizations that are providing resources and platforms for you to get to know others and to get those resources that you need for your classroom. So it does take some legwork, but there are people like yourself, like myself, others on these calls, right? That, and I'm speaking US, like, of course, there's British esports in the UK that's, in my opinion, leading the way, kind of internationally with having, the College of Esports and
absolutely.
All of that. I'm name dropping a lot of organizations.
Yes, no, but you're spot on. Well, that's basically, what we're saying. It's basically to use the long game, which in essence, in my opinion, Star Six Esports is here to stay way after we retire from the space, and especially from my standpoint, whenever a school bring me in, I would say, hey, what will this look like 4 or 5 years from now? And from what you were saying, that's what happens when you don't keep it only to yourself. If you're the only teacher doing it, we all know we are human. We get tired. But if you do invite the community, if you do invite those trade associations, before you know it, now it's no longer just you. You have other people, and in the long game is 3-4 years from now, what will this look like when a younger teacher, that's a lot more hungry than I am, take this over? Where is it gonna be? Now, from what you're saying is building engagement goes past the actual gaming. And to me, the engagement is so crucial because I've seen it. Some students didn't really play games per se, but they wanted to be around those people. And I know some of these students that I had, they just wanted to keep stats. They wanted to work on the website, and they didn't really have any interest in gaming. So now I have a question for you now. For a lot of the teachers that's coming in that thinks that you need a massive, expensive computer to actually start esports, which I know that's not the case. If you have it, hey, good for you. But you don't need a massive gaming room to start in esports. What's your take on that? What are some advice you have for them?
Absolutely. You can start with, an Xbox and controllers, or a PlayStation and controllers. Nintendo is what a lot of districts start with, because you can play Super Smash Bros., Splatoon, Mario Kart, and Rocket League on a Switch. So start, with a Switch. It's a lower cost of a barrier of entry. Consoles are much less expensive. You could start with Minecraft. Minecraft education has build challenges. There's also Bed Wars that's being released here in the fall. There's parkour esports, and I'm mentioning specifically Education Edition because it is secure, and you don't have to worry about other students or other people from across the planet joining your worlds. But those are opportunities, and Minecraft will play on anything. It will play on a tablet, a phone, right, a Chromebook. So if you have those devices, that is, the easiest game to start with. Licenses are exceptionally inexpensive. If you're not an educator, they're $12 a student. If you are an educator, they're $5 a student per year. You can get a whole classroom license for $150. And if you work with the team, sometimes they will even cut you deals on that. And if your district has a Microsoft A3 license or above, you have Minecraft education already. So there are, of course, many ways to start as a lower entry point as far as financially goes. But yeah, it's not necessary. You don't have to have the full-fledged room. You just need a TV or a smart board or a monitor and a console, honestly, to start, or just devices for kids. Leaving the pandemic, a lot of schools were one-on-one for devices, like just whatever device they have, you can start. So that's, it. And you don't have to know everything. I tell educators all the time, the first questions I always ask them are, one, you mentioned sustainability or longevity, right? What are your student outcomes and what are your program goals? They usually don't know. So I help them work through what are those things? Because when we build an esports program, we want to build a sustainable esports program so that when you leave, it will still be there, because it's that important for kids. And I think that once we get those questions kind of off the table, and your students are going to know more than you know about the game and about technology often than you are. Yes, you need to educate yourself. Yes, we need to train you, but empower your students also to lead those clubs and teach you.
Well, that's a good point, and to piggyback on what you're saying, I look at it as the two sides of the same coin. The students, yes, most likely, they're good 20, 30 years, younger than you. So therefore, they're going to have the gaming aspect, but you as the adult in the room, you have that other piece that they need. How do I translate that into a job interview? How do I actually learn how to write my resume? So in a way, both sides actually enhance each other, because the students going to show you a little bit about the gaming. Then now they're going to gain your trust by you intrigued by the gaming aspect, but now you're going to impart your knowledge into them. So it's a nice relationship in essence, because the beauty of the teacher being in the room, those students want to leave high school with some tangible things besides a diploma. They may want to leave with a Photoshop cert. They may want to leave with the culinary degree. So and that's the beauty of CTE. There's not too many pathways or programs. You can leave high school with so many valuable things under your belt, and I think that's why a lot of kids are gravitating to esports, because I feel like they find a place, for the most part, they can be themselves, and they can actually learn stuff. You know what? I can put it in my back pocket right now.
Yeah.
Leave with it.
Absolutely, yes, and in Fresno, the graduation rate for CTE students is 98%. So those that participate in the 4-year program, there's a 98% graduation rate here in Fresno Unified. That's unheard of, right? And
True.
And I think outside of just the education, the teachers who are teaching build relationships with those students, and the kids find a mentor, a friend, right? Somebody that is caring about their future and helping them to reach those goals. I see that far more in CTE classes than in traditional classes. And that's really, really important, I think, in today's day and age, for students to have an adult figure that is a positive person who is influencing their career decisions, but also life decisions.
It's so true. I use the term a lot, which is multidimensional thinking. Because in a lot of different pathways, 2 + 2 is always 4. It's today it's not 6, it's not 7, but where a lot of times where when you have your CTE, where students. So hey, you get into this group and you tell me what the outcome is going to be. You get with your partner. Here's all the data. Here's all the facts. I want to hear from you. And so that's one of the beauty of actually having CTE. It allowed these students to take. I'm not going to say a better role, but more of a stronger role into them having a bigger voice. Where in a lot of other subjects, they're all phenomenal subjects too, but a lot of times a student that's a little bit shy or reserved may not want to be boisterous. Well, let's say, if we got to come up with the new, Nike design, before you know it, now they're going crazy just because everybody has a say on what the shoe should be or the color. So these are the little tiny wins you get, in a CTE classroom. And I'm not saying you can't get that in another classroom. That's all I'm saying at all. But these little things sometimes, happens in CTE, and then we all call it a little win.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. Also, as you were talking, I was thinking about like Skills USA and some of the other competitions that a lot of, CTE teachers get involved with, right? And, you know, within esports, of course, there's web design and game design. And, you know, honestly, we're trying to push to have esports kind of added as a whole, because it includes that production and storytelling and writing, you know, interviewing skills. Like there's so many things. And yet those are real world skills, regardless of the career you go into, right? Content creation and being able to edit videos and whatnot, like that's useful across, you know, multiple genres of careers. And I just saw what Shane put in there, and I agree, Shane, right? Like having that code of conduct and your student goals, and having your students help to write those code of conduct.
Absolutely.
Right? And
Absolutely.
I would say,
thank you, Shane.
Yeah, I would say even for your classrooms, right? Like a CTE classroom, especially if you are, you know, teaching it with the lens of esports, you know, right? You want all of those students to have a same or similar code of conduct that they're following as your actual esports team. And introducing those students to one another and getting them involved, right? Inviting that CTE, you know, graphic design class to come in and meet the esports competitive team. And, you know, talking to them about, you know, what it is that they've put together for their code of conduct, which is so important, because honestly, I think that's a feature that's missing a lot in society, you know, as a whole, is that kids aren't being necessarily taught at home what is proper behavior in situations, and then we have a real opportunity to help shape that.
Peter, thanks for the comment. Okay, so it looks like we probably have, you know, almost 10 minutes left. So I want to go two places quick, you know. So the first one is scholarships. You know, I wanted to touch on that before we end the call. Now, when it comes to esports scholarships, you know, I'm seeing a few students are getting opportunities where normally they wouldn't have, because, as I mentioned earlier, they did not play your traditional sports. You know, they were not, let's say, in a drama club, stuff like that. But I'm seeing they're getting scholarships to go to college to actually play collegiate gaming. What's your take on that? Real quick.
Yeah, so a lot of colleges are offering there. Well, let me rephrase this. There's a few colleges that will offer full ride scholarships for just esports. The majority of them, however, it's esports and. So when you are in a CTE course and you are learning, you know, about, you know, again, let's just use production or shoutcasting or something along those lines. Esports clubs need auxiliary players or auxiliary, you know, that
Absolutely.
kind of the side support for the actual streaming of their matches, and not just the game players or those that play the game. And so a lot of the scholarships are in graphic design, and then also maybe potentially, you know, for the on the esports team. So there's a lot of combinations like that. You know, I think it is important for students to realize that scholarships into four-year colleges for gameplay, although they do exist, you know, even more so than traditional sports, right? Like when you go pro, most professional athletes are, you know, retiring at the ages of 26 and 27 years old, right? Because their manual dexterity begins to slow down. Their mental acuity also slows, right? So I feel it's exceptionally important that is made apparent to students so that they can learn another skill. Yes, go compete. If you are at the top tier, great. Go compete if you can, but then have, you know, I don't want to say a backup plan, but have a plan to how are you going to sustain that into your 30s and 40s and 50s, right? And so learning these other CTE career skills is super important, and also makes you more marketable and available, or there are more scholarships available to you other than just gameplay. So that's kind of my take on it.
No, and no, absolutely, and that's going back to having the whole package, right? That's going back. Well, what does the long game look like when I'm done, competing, So no, you're absolutely right. So now the last question that I wanted to ask, and then I'm hoping that the people on chat can ask some questions too. Now we know, like I mentioned before, Florida has a bill that the passing that teachers need training. So teachers need specialized training. So it's nothing new. So my question to you is, from your experience, what are some tangible ways that admin and other school leaders can actually make sure the teachers in the room get that specialized training?
I'm always encouraging educators, whether you're in the classroom or administration, to think outside the box, right? And try to find trainings that will fit multiple, not, categories, I guess, right? And esports does that. It's not just like, I'll just use the Epic educator training, right? You're learning coding, you're learning design, you're learning editing, you're learning, a skill that for educators, right, that where you can take that back and break that down for your students to learn, across the board. So when I think it's the teachers having the conversation with the administrators, right, to say, hey, here's what I would like to learn, here's what I'd like to do, here's the comprehensive nature of it.
Absolutely.
And having that conversation, because I think oftentimes administrators fall short. And I'll just be honest, like the ed tech landscape right now is hurting, right? Like you're seeing a lot of the with AI and whatnot, you're seeing a lot of those companies that are one trick ponies, right? Or have just one, training.
That's well, you mentioned something that is crucial, and also, what is still, and my advice is, you don't have to start big. You know what? Just learning some basic Photoshop is relevant, because I think a lot of times, teachers in essence might say, what, I don't want to spend a week to do this training because I have so many other things to do, which is perfectly fine. So then find something that's just 2 hours. Learn how to do a quick overlay, because most students probably don't know how to do an overlay in Photoshop. Or it could be OBS. So no, everything you're saying, you definitely spot on. But a lot of times, start small. If you have an hour, then make an hour. If you have a week, then make it a week. And I think that as you start building by I've said the long game a few times, by having the long approach, today you learn overlay, tomorrow, you learn something else. Before you know it, now you're going to teach them how to stream, but you can't start with the streaming. You got to start, baby steps. So now I know we have maybe 3 minutes left. Does anybody in the chat want to ask Julie any questions, or me any questions, or just want to make a statement?
It's been nice to seeing that. Yes, Peter, Africa Esports. Yeah, there's quite a bit going on there in Africa, and that's awesome, right? Like I know Kuro is, was the leaders in Minecraft education esports, but then Mark Jovert also, like, he's building out a whole, program, and there are many other things happening, and it's really wonderful to see, like you talk about changing lives for the better.
It's a worldwide movement.
Exactly.
Well, Julie, thank you so much for being here. I definitely enjoyed our chat.
Thank you for having me.
No, anytime. Anytime. Let me see. Anybody? Okay. Anybody say something? Well, you know what, guys? So the up and coming virtual coffee conversation, it'll be August 5th at 9 a.m. CST time. So if you can join us, okay, please join us for that. And of course, you can always check out the latest Esports Next magazine at esportssta.org/magazine. I believe one just came out, and I got the email last night. Okay, and of course, I had mentioned that white paper a few times because I read it, and you can find that white paper at esports sta.org/resources/the long game. That's where you'll find all the data with everybody they had sampled.
And Nick put in the chat too that there's a new infographic coming out for members to share with parents. So that's exciting because they're just, if there's one place where we're lacking a little bit, I think it is in parent education. And unless you take that on yourself, as an individual, it's not readily available. So thank you to ESTA for doing that.
It's true. No, I enjoy talking with parents just because I feel like, a lot of them are just, a lot of them just want answers, but let's just face it now. There's no shortage of information. The question is this information the right one for me? Because let's face it, all of us have all these different platforms we go on. But so I enjoy talking with parents. And let's face it, for some parents, esports may not be a good fit, but for some it is. And that's the power of having all these different ideas, And you want to go ahead? Is that something, Julie?
No, I was just going to say, I agree wholeheartedly. And I know we're at time. So just wanted to thank everybody for being here. And thank you for,
No, thank you, Nick. Thank you so much. And guys, if you want to learn more about the Esports Trade Association, to become a member, you can always go to www.esta.org. All the information is there. Guys, everyone that's on there, thank you so much. And please, we would love to collaborate with you on some form. So please reach out to us. Julie, again, thank you so much.
Thank you.